Hello there. This is MD. Here with you on SaskiYano. Here we go again. We are in a new After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial, you're gonna be learning about some of the great native effects you can find in Adobe After Effects. There's a lot of really fantastic effects, and I want to start by talking about a super useful effect called Warp Stabilizer. Let me play this clip here. It's super short. And you can see that it is just a complete mess. There's no possibility that you could use this and anything, right? Well, maybe. Yeah, I guess maybe you could. Now, if you're a really eagle-eyed viewer, you may see tiny little jitters in the playback here. Things that don't look quite right. Especially if you concentrate on this line here. You will see it jump around a little bit. However, if you look up here, it looks pretty glassy stable. And this Warp Stabilizer is a super powerful plugin. It's got a ton of options. For stabilization, it can fix rolling shutter, which is an artifact of a lot of modern cameras where they do not record the entire frame at the same time. It records the image off the sensor from the top down or bottom up. One of the reasons that they did a really good job is because this video clip does not have any motion blur in it. This has a very fast shutter speed or exposure time, and so you don't see any motion blur. When your footage does have motion blur, Warp Stabilizer can still stabilize it and stabilize it really well. However, you will see the motion blur. And it looks really weird. And I want to show you that in this next example here. Now, in this example, I have two clips here. And I just want to show you this first one here. I am just going to reset the transform and play it back. Now this has already been stabilized. And in fact both of these clips have the same stabilization applied to them. And what you'll see is that there are certain parts of the image. They have this weird blur artifact. It's very stable. It looks nice. The motion looks nice. It's got a little bit of a kind of prismatic effect there. But didn't pay no attention to that. The main point here is to show you this blurring artifacts that can happen when you're using a camera and you are specific about the shutter speeds. Of this was shot on a cinema camera. There are two sections in here that kind of look like a mess. So let me show you. I am just gonna put this over here. Let me show you another effects called Camera Shake De-Blur. Now, let's find those blurry frames. And check this out. You see what's happening over here. There is no blur. It's pretty incredible what's happening here. So After Effects is analyzing the footage. And it's taking the sharper frames on either side of this blur. And it's blending them with these blurry frames. And the effect, let me play this back free here, is that it more or less makes this shot usable. A lot of times these two effects are total lifesavers. So if you have a clip, chuck the Warp Stabilizer on there. And then if there's some motion blur artifacts that you need to get rid of, try this Camera Shake De-Blur. When they work, it's absolutely incredible. Alright, let's talk about some other things you're gonna be using inside of After Effects. Things like color correction. If you have a look over here in the color correction folder, you'll see there's a lot of color correction effects. A really good number of them. One of the most powerful. Maybe this Lumetri effect. It's got a ton of features. Now this has been around the Adobe products for quite a while. It showed up in Premiere several years ago. And After Effects. It's recently been updated. And it's got everything from your basic color correction, your primary color correction things, like your color temperature, your tint, and your temperature, your exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, all that good stuff. Things to do. Your basic color correction. You can even use lookup tables in here. It's got some presets here for various cameras. Or you can load a custom lookup table, blue steel, or day for night, where you can give things that were shot in the daytime or nighttime. Look, there's a lot of nice creative sort of looks in here. In addition to that, you can kind of make your own creative look here with the split toning and, pull the colors around and give your shadows a nice tint. Give your highlights a little bit of warm jazz here. And you can dial up some creativity here. It's got a little bit of sharpening. It's got some vibrance. You can punch up your footage's color. And that's different than saturation. Because I believe vibrance protects skin tones. So, a lot of cool creative options there. In addition to that, there's a huge curve section here. In the newer version, which is why I'm using Adobe CC 2021, has been updated with these new curve tools here. Hue versus saturation. Hue versus hue. Hue versus luma. Or you can target certain parts of your image and make adjustments. For example, you can target things that are of a certain hue chains or saturation. You can target things that are of a certain hue. For example, we can grab all of this green grass here. Maybe add one more little point there. And then we can totally change its hue to purple grass. Maybe expand that out a little bit and really get pretty wild. We can take all of the blue colors here and change that to something else. That's an absurd example, but it's a very powerful tool to be able to adjust the colors. And there's lots of different combinations here. There's also color wheels. For those of you who are used to using color wheels and color correction, effects or applications, highlight, shadows, mid-tones, very powerful. There's also HLS secondary, which is where you can be very precisely target parts of your image using a key. So, you can select certain colors, luminance, or saturation. And there's some sliders here that really help you to dial that in. And then you can make a correction based on that selection. So you can just skin tones. Or if there's something that's really bright or super saturated, you can select only that color or that object and make that adjustment. So Luma tree color is really powerful. Sometimes you don't need to use a super powerful effect to make an adjustment on your clips. Sometimes all you need is something simple, like a curves adjustment. And maybe just wanna take this clip and just reduce the contrast a little bit. No problem. You can do that using a curves. Maybe you think, well, okay, that's nice. But now it seems a little bit saturated. Okay. Let's throw in a very simple effect called tint. You can just apply like a 10% desaturation or very small amount of desaturation. 10 can do some other cool things as well. So you can remap the black and the white colors. And there's a whole host of other really great effects in here. Things like levels and tritons, vibrance, colorama. Lots of good stuff for you to explore in there. Alright. Let's talk about some blurs. After Effects comes with a handful of really great looking blurs. A lot of times, I use something very simple, like a Gaussian blur, which has a particular look to it. It's nice. It renders pretty fast. It's pretty smooth looking. Sometimes that's not the right color for you. And that's totally fine. Maybe you need a fast box blur. Right. You can see. With the same amount of blur, it looks a little bit different. Now, it's hard to tell. So, I'm just gonna duplicate this. Ctrl D, slide this guy over about halfway. Yep, pretty close. And I put this one on Gaussian blur. So you can see. Things look a little bit different here. With the box blur being over here. And the Gaussian blur being over here. Handles the highlights a little bit differently. One of my most favorite blurs. And a really great looking blur. Is the camera lens blur. And this is really nice. Watch what happens if I just leave everything at their defaults. And I crank up the blur radius here. Turn up the repeat edge pixels. And we'll push in here. This is giving you a really nice simulated camera lens blur. Where you can see highlights taking the form of the shape of the aperture blades. Which is exactly what happens in a real camera. It's a really great looking blur. Why wouldn't you want to use the camera lens bar all the time? Well, because it does not render very fast. Look at the difference here. If we threw this effect on how fast it's rendering. I will duplicate this. Now, thrown something like fast box blur. This effect renders way faster. And if you have a really complicated composition, throwing on camera lens blur can sometimes really jack up your render times. So, it does look nice. But, you know, everything in life is a trade-off. You want quality. Or do you want it fast? Sometimes you can't always have it both ways. Alright, that's a good place to stop. There are certainly many more effects to talk about. And there are a few that I want to cover in the next tutorial. So check that out. Finally, we are done for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave your comment down below in the comments section. Also, if you want to learn more, take a look at our first channel, Everything PS. See you next time. Bye.